My father was a tireless advocate for the law. He was a criminal prosecutor. Some say ruthless, others say righteous. Yeah, I'm cut from the same cloth. I can't really remember who I was before I became a cop. It's my job to make bad things happen to bad people.
She did not want to go to work that night. He did not walk the streets at night. We all knew as soon as Jackie didn't come home that something was wrong. The overpass was Jackie's last walk. Jackie deserves that someone be held accountable for this. Every time I come here, I recall Jackie's last walk. My mother was devastated. All that she wanted to do was look for Jackie's killer. We would follow any tips. We kept hoping and looking. Someone decided to end Jackie's life and take her away from us.
How has it been for you, this experience, losing Jackie?
I've lost other people in my life from illnesses, old age, and you can intellectually process it while you're grieving. In Jackie's case, you can't. The grieving has been done, but there are no answers.
Having something hanging for so many years and not knowing the answer, I would think it wears you down a bit because you've lost something so precious so early.
I don't know if there's such a thing as closure, but I know for me that I would rather know who's responsible than live all my life not trying to find answers. When I met with police last year, I had 3 requests, one of them being if Jackie's diary could be returned to us. That's the only thing I have, and I'm willing to offer it if that would help.
It will help. We will take that. Thank you. The exhibit tag shows 1969, October 4th, at 15 minutes after 10 o'clock p.m. That may have been the last time it was looked at. Having the diary in my hand as an artifact of Jackie's short life hammers home the importance of what we're doing here. With your blessing, we would like to bring this case back into the light.
I believe it is solvable.
Being from London, I always knew about this case. Everyone here has a personal connection to this case and should be angered that it's still open. I've been a cop and a professor of criminology for years, and have used that experience to assemble a squad of civilian subject matter experts. They must approach each case completely unbiased, to not box themselves into conventional thinking, to bring fresh eyes and new technologies to the table. Their job, and mine, is to investigate the coldest of cold cases, the murders that time forgot. Jacqueline English, case number 69-52, the 52nd murder in the province in 1969. October 4th, 1969, approximately 5 p.m. Jacqueline, or Jackie as she was known, attends her place of work here. The Metropolitan store located in the Treasure Island Plaza was then a rural area outside the city of London. Jackie was a waitress at the Metropolitan store. 10:15 p.m., Jackie is seen leaving the store, walking over the overpass on Wellington Road. 2 witnesses describe Jackie as getting into a 4-door sedan. That's the last time Jackie is seen alive. 4 days later, the nude body of Jackie English is discovered floating in the water of the Big Otter Creek near the town of Tilsonburg, almost an hour outside the city of London. No clothing on the body, even her earrings had been removed. It's determined that Jackie died from a single severe blow to the head.
Young girls like Jacqueline, to have her life cut short in such a violent and atrocious manner, it's horrifying.
I have a 14-year-old daughter. Just disturbing as a parent, it's evil.
The fact that it was so long ago and it hasn't been resolved, and the fact that only Anne is left, a sister, the length of the not knowing, it's tragic.
A number of Jackie's belongings, including torn pieces of her clothing, are found approximately 10 miles from where the body was dumped. A pair of brown penny loafers she was seen wearing as she was walking home were found 10 miles from where the other clothing was discarded. A witness comes forward, a woman named Betty Harrison. She tells the police she saw Jackie speaking with a customer inside the Metropolitan store, a man she describes as having made Jackie look uneasy. She provides police with a description that allows them to create this composite drawing. Ms. Harrison begins to receive threatening phone calls, telling her she should not have gone to the police. In subsequent days, she receives a sympathy card in the mail. The only inscription on the card is the statement, "We will be watching you."
It also indicates to me that the perpetrator, they're very connected to the media. There seems to be almost an aspect of performance.
Absolutely. About a month later, Ms. Harrison is ambushed by a man with a knife and confined in her car while he cuts her face upwards of 27 times.
The attack on Mrs. Harrison seems very theatrical. If her attacker was legitimately concerned with being connected to Jackie's murder, why wouldn't he just kill her? Was Ms. Harrison able to describe her attacker, and did it match the composite?
Not very well. It was dark, and given the brutality of the attack, she didn't get a good look.
This Miss Harrison is still alive and willing to talk to us.
She's dead.
She's dead. It would have been very helpful to be able to speak to somebody who saw something at the time.
So far, the squad is asking all the right questions. They're looking for a way into this case, and that's exactly what I want to see from them. Other questions that connect to the evidence.
Was Jackie sexually assaulted?
No obvious sign of sexual assault other than her body being stripped nude, her clothes being found torn.
No defensive wounds?
No defensive wounds. Her boyfriend at the time voluntarily provided a blood sample for comparison to the DNA at the scene because it was thought that the sample may have been from when they had consensual sex earlier on the 4th.
What was the boyfriend doing on the night of the 4th?
In the notes that I've received, and I'll share with you, there's a detailed statement taken from the boyfriend. He has an alibi.
Okay.
It's just weird that there wasn't necessarily a lot of trauma to her body, but the person who was threatened afterwards with the knife, there was substantial violence.
So is it the same person? Is it a copycat? We know that there's a number of unsolved sex slayings in London at the time.
Mike and I met with the sister who had mentioned that this person named Marilyn Hurd, a friend of Jackie's. After Jackie died, Marilyn tried to commit suicide. Marilyn had a picture of Jackie, and on the back of this picture it said, "The name of the killer will remain with me."
Antonella's revelation raises a lot of questions for me about Marilyn, who she is and what else she knows about the circumstances about Jackie's death.
It could be huge. It could break the case if we can get her to come clean and talk to us.
What do you want to do with this?
I'd like to go to where the body was dumped. I think it'd be useful to map all of the different locations, because if we have the point where she was abducted, where the body and other clothing was dumped, it might give us a useful radius to start plotting persons of interest.
I like where you're going with that. Geographic profiling is key in this case. Peter?
I'd like to get a look at as much archival data as possible and map it.
Maybe pair up with someone who then can look at similar cases.
Mike, you mentioned that there's a lot of sex slayings in London, so I'd be interested in looking into those cases, public forums, that kind of thing.
Antonella?
I want to look at the diary, first of all. I want to see what's in the diary. I want to see what she thought, what she did.
Monty?
Marilyn, you'd have to go and try and talk to Marilyn.
Find her. There's still an element of danger to this case. Be mindful of who we're dealing with here. Stay vigilant. All right, let's go. Jackie's murder is a very complicated case, and it will push this squad to its limits. Not only do we have to unearth old facts, we need to uncover new information.
40 years is a long time for a case to be cold. I don't know whether or not Marilyn Hurd is alive, but somebody has to remember her.
Jackie English was last seen alive on the night of October 4th, 1969, when she was on her way home from work. Her body was discovered in a creek days later, over 40 miles from where she was last seen. Her clothes and shoes were then found miles from where her body was located. I need Antonella to look at our victim. I need her to help us understand who Jackie was. Why is it that she got in the car that night? Who was driving? Was it someone she knew, someone from her inner circle, a friend and acquaintance? Or someone from an outer perimeter, someone who had seen her before, and when they saw her walking that overpass, saw an opportunity and took it.
I came in this evening to really focus on reading Jackie's diary. I'm interested to see what Jackie was thinking at the time, what was going on in her life. There are thoughts, there are reflections that she's experiencing. I want to get to that. As a psychotherapist, you have to read more than what's actually there. After reading the diary several times, I noticed that there could be some code embedded in the text. Cracking this code might be key in helping us in this investigation.
I've just got a call about some files and some personal diaries that belong to a detective who worked this case in the late 60s. I'm hoping that there's something buried in those files that will light a fire under this case. Dennis?
Oh, Mike,
Nice to meet you.
I found some interesting information. My father passed away, and he was a detective sergeant in this area. They spent a lot of time on this Jackie English case. And there's the diaries. I also found in his basement some files. And you see these diaries. They tell what he did, who he met. Jackie English bothered him all his life because it never did come to resolution.
This is a great gift. This is really remarkable. I've never seen anything like this. This original detective was so focused, so haunted by this case, that he duplicated all of his notes and then made secondary copies of some of his key files, boxed them up, and he kept them as a time capsule in his house. One day he hoped that someone could carry on his work, that new technology would provide new momentum for his hunches that he could never follow up on, and that no one would listen to him about. I just found something interesting in the notes from the original investigation. It turns out that Jackie's coworker, Marilyn Hurd, who attempted suicide in the days after Jackie's death, changed her version of events about what happened that October night, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Hi, Ann, it's Mike. I'd like to come talk to you. I'm just following up on some new information. It's about somebody you know. One of the nagging questions in this case is the behavior of Marilyn Hurd. What is the secret, do you think, that she has?
I think Marilyn knows exactly what happened to Jackie. Marilyn has directed everybody in a million different ways, but Marilyn always was saving the ending for another day. Marilyn's mind has covered it up, or she's deliberately not sharing that with us.
Your sister's murder touched off this behavior?
Yes.
this botched suicide attempt?
I believe Marilyn holds the key, and something happened the Friday night. He's related. He was starting his career as a criminal very early on.
Do you know if he was out of jail at the time of Jackie's murder?
I have no idea if in jail or free.
We may be looking at someone who's fallen between the cracks. We need to look further into Marilyn's relatives, specifically his criminal background, if this is the person that Marilyn is protecting. The best indicator of future behavior is past behavior, so I want to know what he was up to at the time and whether or not he would have had motive and opportunity to abduct and murder Jackie.
Right now, I'm up to trying to find Marilyn Hurd, but I haven't had any luck looking for her on the computer, so I'm gonna go old school. She's not listed in any current listing, but maybe a few years ago or 10 years ago, she had an address. There's definitely some phone numbers here for me to look into. If Marilyn Hurd is alive and in London, I'll find her.
The squad is investigating the murder of Jackie English, who was murdered on her way home from her part-time job in October 1969. Suffice it to say, after 40 years, the trail is very cold. Antonella is looking through Jackie's old diary to see if there's something in there that can help the squad out.
I noticed that there could be some code embedded in the text.
In addition to that, Peter and Renee are conducting a geoprofiling experiment, looking at other cases that may be related to Jackie's.
Geographic profiling is a way of taking into account multiple crimes in a crime series, and we're applying Rosmo's formula to the case of Jackie English because we have multiple data points to work with here. Rosmo's formula is a mathematical equation designed to find the most likely residence of a serial killer based on his crimes.
Rosmo's formula is currently the gold standard in terms of geoprofiling. It helped net Canada's worst serial killer, Robert Pickton, developed by an academic police officer like me.
I started my geographic profile with only one point, Jackie English's home at the time when she was killed.
The distance between the Metropolitan Store, the highway, and London city limit remain unchanged, and those variables will all be important factors to incorporate into the geographic profile that Peter's constructing. Right now, we're at the site where Jackie's body was discovered in Big Otter Creek, and I'm interested in examining the landscape around the bridge and around the creek where she was found to see what other options the perpetrator may have had for disposing of her body. I find it hard to believe that if the body were dropped from this height into water that shallow, they wouldn't show any signs of scraping the bottom. We can't assume that she was actually dropped from the bridge. Perhaps her body was carried down the bank and placed in the creek itself, which means that there could be some added significance to this body of water.
Renee's confirmed the locations where Jackie was last seen alive and where Jackie's body was found. Renee's emailed me these coordinates, and I'm going to put them into my geographic profile and start to build a more complete picture. Dania's been researching murders that have occurred in and around the area where Jackie was killed. Once I get those details, I'll be able to put it all together and see if a pattern emerges indicating where the killer might have lived.
I'm intrigued why the perpetrator would have selected the bridge itself as a location to dispose of her body. It's a very conspicuous spot. It would indicate to me that the perpetrator wants the victim to be found.
When I was reading through Jackie English's diary, I discovered that certain parts of it were written in some sort of secret code. Those are the encryptions that were in the diary. Do you think you can do anything with those? I could really use Monty and Peter's help to help me crack it.
This E's got to represent either an I or an A, because those are the only two words in the English language that can be in a sentence and just be one letter.
We've got some double letters too, right? Like the double B at the beginning of the word.
What can that be? Llama?
Yeah.
Like what other word in the English language begins with a double letter? I can't think of one other than llama.
And we have is likely a substitution cipher, which means that every letter has been replaced by exactly one other letter, and that this scheme doesn't change or evolve.
If E equals I, let's say that's the case. If we go 1, 2, 3, 4.
Once we figure out what scheme Jackie used to encode this text, we can then proceed character by character.
Okay, I got it. 1, 2, B equals L. 1, 2 in. If J equals D, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You follow?
Yeah, I think you got it. Yeah, so we've got Lloyd. The name Lloyd fits that template.
When I checked into Jackie's background, I found out she had a boyfriend named David. When I checked into his background, I found out he had a brother named Rick, and Rick's middle name is Lloyd.
What's V gonna be?
R, right?
R. French. She missed a letter. Lloyd French kissed me.
Lloyd French kissed me?
Yeah. There's one down here as well. F. M was A, right?
Mm-hmm. I faked tears.
I faked tears.
That's what I got.
There's only 2 instances of that encryption, which for some reason she wanted to keep these 2 secret. Yeah. Lloyd French kissed me? This is unsettling. French kisses and fake tears? Who is this Lloyd? And could he somehow be connected to Jackie's murder?
Contained in the original file for Jackie English is a letter dating to 1978, 9 years after she was murdered. It's written by the brother of Jackie's boyfriend at the time of her murder. In this letter, Rick is seeking Dave's forgiveness for something horrible that he's done. The writer will not mention the event. Substitution words he uses include the burden, the sin, my sin. What he's referring to, I don't know. Could the brother, Rick, have had something to do with Jackie's murder? That's the question. The squad has been pushing hard to find the person or persons responsible for the murder of Jackie English. This is a group of civilians. Detective work is not in their usual wheelhouse. That said, so far I'm impressed with what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. It's imperative that we track down Jackie's co-worker, Marilyn Hurd, and look closer at her relative. I've been digging through some old police files, and I found an interesting letter between Jackie's boyfriend at the time and his brother. The content of that letter is strange, and it may have something to do with her murder. I'm recruiting the assistance of Dr. John Olson from the UK, arguably the world expert when it comes to forensic linguistics. He's been used by detectives all over Europe in cases where they need to analyze suicide letters, ransom letters, or confessions. In this case, I want him to get to the bottom of this concealed sin that's being referred to in this letter between the 2 brothers. If you'd just like to give me your take on the letter as it was given to you.
One of the first things that I look at when I look at a document of this nature is to see whether I can somehow get a picture of the relationship between the writer and the receiver.
I've removed the date, I've removed any reference to any specific person by name or by relationship, so he's looking at a blinded document.
Upon reading this, it is clear that any relationship between the writer and the receiver of these documents goes back a very long way. But yet, there is no love lost between us. That made me think of siblings, that we are dealing with siblings.
What, in your expert opinion, is it that the writer is talking about?
I think the word sinfulness really gives us the clue. It strongly suggests to me a sexual incident. The very fact that it's never made overt, this is a very common strategy used by people when talking about incidents of which they feel some kind of shame. There is a certain crypticness about it. This may be because the writer, it's just occurred to me, was perhaps in prison at the time, but even so, there is no indication here of a third party. This seems to be very much a matter, because of the intensity of it, between the writer and the receiver.
In your experience, is this thing that the writer is referring to a cryptic admission to a murder, in your opinion?
No, absolutely not. I think this is a private shame that we're dealing with rather than a public crime.
Dr. Olson, in analyzing this letter and knowing nothing else about this case, is satisfied that it's correspondence between two siblings and that it's in reference to some sexual incident and that it's not a confession to murder. In combing through the original lead detective's personal diaries and journals, I've noted that her boyfriend at the time, David, had an alibi and was immediately excluded as a suspect. That said, his brother Rick has some significant involvement with the law. In looking at what he's done, nothing comes close to the very specific MO and signature that we see in Jackie's murder. It's time we move on and explore other possibilities.
When Mike talked to Jackie's sister Anne, he found out that
Marilyn Hurd's relative had some run-ins with the law.
So I'm checking crime sites, social media sites, and any other records to see what I can come up with. See if there's any buzz about this guy still out there.
Dania has found some compelling information about Marilyn's relative that might prove key in moving this case forward. We have uncovered a very interesting development. Of course, we all know Marilyn Hurd, whose botched suicide attempt in the weeks after Jackie's murder revealed that she had a photograph of Jackie in her pocket with some sort of cryptic, ominous message that she would take the secret of the killer to her grave. And who is it that Marilyn would be so willing to protect? And it turns out that Marilyn has a relative. And in he stabbed and slashed a boy playing on a lawn. He was later arrested, charged, and convicted in this attack. He was paroled or on full release just before Jackie's murder. We need to determine whether he and Jackie ever made acquaintance. I was also able to obtain a high school class photograph. This is him here. Did he also slash Betty Harrison, the witness who provided police with that composite description? If so, is he also more directly connected to Jackie's murder? So we're going to need to tighten this up. Renee, I want you to look further into what happened. And I want you to track down an expert in facial recognition who can overlay and compare this image from to the 1969 composite drawing. These are important finds with limited time remaining. Let's get at it. The missing piece of the puzzle continues to be Marilyn Hurd. Whatever it is she knows or thinks she knows is key here, so finding her is imperative.
Residential. Gotcha. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, it's Monty. How are you? Yeah, I found Marilyn Hurd. In London. I'll email it to you right now.
Finally, this is our opportunity to find out if Marilyn Hurd really knows something. Is she protecting her relative?
I know who they are.
Who are they? The squad is looking to help solve the 1969 murder of Jackie English. She was last seen getting into a car and then vanishing into the night. We already have one suspect. She had a relative who, just prior to Jackie's murder, was convicted of a serious assault. It seems as though she may be protecting him. Tell me how you knew Jackie.
We started working together at the Metropolitan store. We had to walk over the 401 overpass to get to the closest city bus stop.
Okay. I knew that if I was aggressive in my questioning, that she would probably shut down, the same as she did with Anne English. Now, what do you remember about the night she went missing?
I wasn't with her the night she went missing, but she gave me a call sometime after 1 o'clock in the afternoon to ask me if I would go with these two men that she knew. I said I wouldn't, and I warned her about going with them. I know who they are.
Who are they?
I can't.
In the weeks after Jackie's murder, a security guard downtown found you with a photo in your pocket of Jackie.
I took an overdose myself.
But you were found with Jackie's photo in your pocket, and there was an inscription on the back stating something like,
I knew who killed Jackie English.
and you take it to your grave. Who's that?
I was a big confidant back there. I never broke a secret. If someone told me something and asked me not to tell anybody, I wouldn't tell anybody.
It's always frustrating when a witness clams up and won't fork over the information needed to help break a case open. Sometimes it's because they're genuinely afraid. Sometimes it's because they think they're being loyal to some confidant. It's important that I find another method of discovering who exactly she's protecting. Did your relative know Jackie?
Not very well.
Had they met before?
I don't know.
Did he ever come to visit you at the store? Might he
No.
have? No? 19 stabbed a small child. Let's just cut
No.
to the chase.
That stabbed a small child.
Okay.
And I went to the jail and asked him why he was taking the
rap?
The rap, and he said he didn't think would survive delinquency school.
So when got out in 1969,
okay, he got into trouble again apparently,
Right.
and armed robbery. But I knew could never do that.
so let me get this straight. He didn't stab the child. Somebody else did. And this armed robbery, he didn't do that either.
No,
But he took the rap for both.
he did.
Okay.
I've only ever told the truth as I remember it.
Do you still keep in touch with him?
No, I don't know where he's living or anything. I was too drugged up on psychiatric medication to keep tabs on him.
Over 40 years later, Marilyn Hurd is still protecting the identity of whoever it is she thinks killed Jackie English. The question is this an elaborate game she's playing, or has the trauma of Jackie's murder actually twisted her own memories to the point where she actually believes everything that she's saying and thinking? I'm also curious who they are. She keeps referring to them as they. Does this include Marilyn's relative and one or two or more other people, or different people entirely? We need to focus on cold hard facts and move this case forward, not conjecture or guesswork or what Marilyn Hurd thinks she may know.
Renee and I have been working on a geographic profile for Jackie, plotting locations where she was last seen, where her body was discovered, and where her clothing was found. Meanwhile, Danya's been looking into similar crimes with comparable signatures to combine into our geographic profile. Our hope is that by cross-referencing all locations, we are able to pinpoint where the killer most likely lived.
So I sent you guys the spreadsheet on the London sex slings. Is there anything that you guys found in terms of patterns or commonalities?
There was one case,
Right?
it occurred in 19... If you guys want to take a look at... The case bears some remarkable similarities to Jackie. So was last seen getting into a car. Her body, her clothes, and her shoes were all found scattered widely.
Wow.
And the most obvious similarity is that evidence from the case was found near the same gravel pit where Jackie's shoes were left.
The MO, the age, and circumstances.
Many
how the victim was-
commonalities between these two cases.
Yeah.
And even though it was solved, the conviction didn't occur until 1970. So the timeline also fits for Jackie's case.
Jackie was 69, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Are they still in jail? Were they free? It's kind of like an adrenaline rush, just realizing those connections.
What's this guy's name?
David.
Renee's find with respect to this David character. I mean, this is really what this initiative is about. This is what open source investigations ideally yield, which is a match between where Jackie's shoes were dumped and where David's victim was also dumped. That can't be dismissed as a coincidence. Peter, how'd you make out with Rosmo's formula in your geographic profile?
Pretty well. So let me just throw this up on the smartboard here. Rosmo's formula is a mathematical equation designed to determine where a serial killer lives. If we assume that one serial killer was responsible for Jackie's murder as well as the other murders in the same place and time that we've discovered, then Rosmo's formula allows us to pool the locations of these multiple murders and more accurately determine where the serial killer lives.
So we've got place last seen for Jacqueline English, the various locations where her clothing was found, where her body was located. We've got the location of the attack on witness Betty Harrison. We've got home address at the time. All of this seems to be surrounding this red center. Explain the significance of that.
So here, overlaid on a map of London and surrounding towns, is the most likely location of who killed Jackie English. The highest probability is marked by this red oval. And this red oval is centered on the town of Ontario.
David lived in the same town, and the formula indicates that in the Jackie English case, that town is the most likely home base for the killer. So we're going to need to tighten this up. We've still got a lot of work to do. We still need to determine if we should be looking at Marilyn's relative. It's potentially being involved in Jackie's murder. But it's also important to take a hard look at this David, find out what involvement he might have had. It's time to start nailing this case down. This civilian squad has done a fantastic job unearthing new information about the unsolved murder of Jackie English. Already at this point in our investigation, we have several persons of interest. As it turns out, Jackie's coworker, Marilyn Hurd, had a relative who was convicted of a serious assault just prior to Jackie's murder. But it's also important to take a hard look at this David fellow, find out what he was up to, find out what involvement he might have had. Thus far, the information is pretty compelling.
And this red oval is centered on the town of Ontario.
That town is the most likely home base for the killer. It's time to start nailing this case down.
Right now, we have 2 persons of interest in this case. We also have a composite drawing of someone that a witness saw Jackie talking to the night she went missing. So I'm at Brock University to meet with a researcher who specializes in facial perception. I'm hoping to see whether the composite drawing resembles either of our persons of interest.
The problem with his face, as you can see, is that it's incredibly grainy. And so that makes it quite difficult to find some of the edges.
This is a picture of David.
David's image is quite good. He's looking straight ahead.
So can you perhaps explain to me how you're going to compare these images to each other?
I'll try to identify ways in which this composite is distinctive by comparing them to an average face. This is the Caucasian average. So we'll find out how it differs. Then what we'll do is we'll do some measurements on David's face and on face and see whether they differ in the same way or the opposite way. Now, if we look at he only shares distinctive features in 2 ways. What's really interesting about his face is his forehead is particularly large. It's so much larger than average that I would consider that to be a fairly important difference. You can see that David does have a small forehead, and if we go from the brow to the middle of the lips, it's also larger. So in other words, just like the composite, the middle of his face seems to be relatively large. He seems to have a smallish chin. Where I have little green check marks, that indicates that he differs from the average face in the same way as that composite drawing. David has 4 green check marks compared to having only 2, which means David is more similar to the composite. It's not a positive ID, but it's saying it could be.
We just have to be careful to what extent we take these results, because the sketch was not necessarily Jackie's murderer.
I've worked a lot of weird cases in my day. Jackie English's case is probably the most twisted I've ever encountered personally. So who are we left with? Renee, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, I went to Brock University to meet with Dr. Kathy Mondlock. She was able to establish that the sketch could be of David, and it is less likely to be that of our other person of interest, but it doesn't mean that David is the person who was the basis for the sketch.
Peter, I'm going to come to you with respect to the forensic geographic profile.
And reran it to see, without any prior assumptions of who killed Jackie, what does the geographic profile algorithm tell us? And sure enough, like before, lights right up. And the geographic profile prioritizes David over all our persons of interest.
Along with Peter's geographic profile, we know from news reports from that period that this David character was convicted of dumping his victim's body just north of his hometown. 3 years later, Jackie English's penny loafers turn up just a few meters away. This is not a coincidence. Dania, with respect to our second person of interest, what were you able to find out?
He was convicted and sentenced to prison for 3 years. In 1970, a year after Jackie's murder, he abducted, attacked, and confined a female in her car. She did escape by rolling out of the moving vehicle.
Eerily similar in MO to what happened in Jackie's case. And the question is, what happened to him after that?
We were able to confirm that this person is currently living in Scotland. However, we don't know exactly where he is. Searching for him, doing whatever I possibly could, I could not get anything.
Marilyn's relative is a ghost. Monty?
Well, David was not a ghost. I found him. He was fully paroled and released from prison in 1980 after serving 10 years for non-capital murder. He's moved around quite a bit over the last 40 years, but he's out there.
In 6 weeks, given the age of this case, we've made remarkable progress to narrow down our list of suspects. Without ruling out the second person, we need to prioritize David as the prime suspect. The squad can take this case no further, and the police have received a copy of our research and analysis. We identified 5 people of interest in this investigation, and we're now down to 2. One is Marilyn's relative.
Yes.
And the second is a person named David. Let's talk about Marilyn's relative first.
Okay.
You said Jackie would never get in a car with someone she didn't know.
Yes.
They had met at least once or twice.
Yes.
So Jackie would presumably get in the car with him. In 1970, he abducted another woman and held her in a car by her throat until she jumped out of a moving car and escaped with her life. He was then jailed for 3 years and has since moved to Scotland. You can't rule out his earlier behavior, his predictors, as being, good indicators of what he was capable of. So the next thing we did was we conducted what's called a geographic profile. It was deemed highly accurate in terms of pinpointing an offender's probable home base. Our geographic profile of all places in the world points to Ontario. In 1960, David lived in. In 1960, he had already killed. This can't be dismissed as a coincidence.
No.
Statistically, all of these factors in total point to him slightly more than Marilyn's relative. Again, we can't rule out either one.
Is he still in jail?
He's not.
Oh.
But we know where he is. The fact he is alive and out there will put this case very much back into the public interest.
We left no stone unturned. We did everything we possibly could.
I'm just finally happy that we have a suspect. I was apprehensive before coming in, but now I'm excited because it is an opening to an answer. Life is cruel because the older you get, the more you tend to miss someone because you realize you should have a sister or you should have nieces and nephews. She should have been here. She should have been part of our lives. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Michael, very much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, Antonio.
past 45 years, I have been investigating the unsolved death of my sister, Teresa Allure. Teresa disappeared in Quebec, Canada in 1978. We were being told by the police that it could have been a drug overdose. Homicide is off the radar. She was not a drug addict. To me, her being found in her bra and her underwear in the middle of nowhere suggests sexual murder. I just wanted to know, whatever the truth was. It's decades later. I wasn't supposed to do my whole life doing this. I know my parents worry about me. I know my brother worries.
I feel very much that this is a story about two tragedies. It's important for me to be here today to be part of the work that John started on the investigation of my sister Teresa's death. I seriously thought about not doing it, but I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't partake in this and try to complete the story in some way for John and for the family, for all of us.
I ride a bike and I cycle at least 30 miles every day because I need 2 hours to myself. My sister definitely, I think, found a sense of escape on the bike. I even find myself like adopting her style, which was to ride low. And it's not a heady thing. I don't make too much about it, but I know what it is. I know why I do it. The more I investigate the murder of my sister, the more I'm forced to confront the horror of Teresa's death, because your whole objective is to know the truth. So I'm being forced to confront the place I don't really want to go, whether I like it or not. I come from a family of a brother and a sister. Teresa was my older sister. I also have an older brother, Andre. We all three of us were born in southern Ontario in Canada.
It was always a fun time growing up. And with John and Teresa, there was always something going on. There was never a dull moment.
Teresa was fun, adventurous, caring. She would stick up for the little guy. And I definitely looked up to Teresa. We all did. By the late summer of 1978, Teresa had decided on going to Champlain College in a rural town called Lennoxville, about 100 miles outside of Montreal. My brother was also at the same school. Teresa was last seen around 6 o'clock in the evening outside the dining hall where students traditionally waited for the bus. Her residence was about 10 kilometers from the campus. The first realization that something is wrong is that she had told a couple of friends that she might stop by their room to listen to records later after she finished her book report, and she's a no-show. People are like, well, maybe she decided to go back to Montreal. We'll see her in class Monday morning. Monday arrives. There's no sign of Teresa. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, fellow students notify my brother, who was there, and say, none of us have seen Teresa.
My worry meter at that time was very, very high. Went to her room. Things looked like they hadn't been touched, and she hadn't been there. Then Friday, I called home and I said, Teresa has been missing for a week.
My parents come into my bedroom and they say to me, Teresa's missing. We're going to drive to Quebec to find out what's going on. There's meetings between my parents and the police and school officials. Some of the theories that the authorities told my parents were, your daughter is a runaway. Your daughter is a drug dealer and she's running drugs. Your daughter is a lesbian. She's ashamed and she's decided to isolate herself. None of those theories made sense to my family, but a missing person investigation was initiated. There were posters made up with Teresa's photo, have you seen this woman, and notices in the local newspapers.
My parents thought that the local police who were involved in the investigation were doing what they needed to do, but it wasn't really going anywhere. Now it's Christmas time, and we're all back home dealing with Teresa's disappearance. We all knew something was horribly wrong.
Our Christmases were so full of life. That was gone. But there was always that hope that this would resolve itself. And she would show up, and it would be some kind of grandiose misunderstanding. Good Friday, April 13th, 1979. It's spring, snow's starting to melt. There's a muskrat trapper at the side of the road in Compton, Quebec, which is about 1 kilometer from the student residence where Teresa had been living. And he goes into a small wooded area to set some traps, and he sees near some brush what he thinks is a mannequin. And as he gets closer, he realizes that it's the body of a woman. Face down in a small body of water, in her bra and her underwear, and he immediately phones the police. One of the investigators at the scene knew that Teresa's been missing for 5.5 months. So he makes the phone call to my father and asked him to come and identify the body. We all got in the car and drove to the headquarters of the Sûreté du Québec in downtown Montreal, which housed the coroner's office at that time. And my father walked down a hallway into the morgue.
To this day, I remember him coming back. He was as white as a ghost, and he just told us that it was Teresa.
The guy who went down that hallway was not the guy who came out the other side, and he was never quite the same again. When they actually do the autopsy, the coroner says, my conclusion is violent death of undetermined means. Well, what does that mean? Violent death caused by her? Caused by someone else? What is it?
Undetermined violent means. Those words alone don't provide you with any closure at all on Teresa's death.
My parents were being told by the police essentially that this was her fault, that it could have been a variety of options that all blamed her. It was a drug overdose, and she wandered there. Some students found her dead in her bed and panicked, so decided to wrap her in a blanket and dump her there. The message going out to the press is the same message There's an article that's published very prominently, and the headline is Teresa Lore, A History of Drugs or a Drug Story. It was a very intense few days, overwhelming. For 5.5 months, we all questioned what was going on here.
I returned to Champlain College, and I was asked to attend a meeting with the head investigator on the case, and he presented me with 2 of Teresa's personal items. Number 1 was her wallet, and number 2 was her gray scarf. And he said, we found the scarf in the field by the bridge in Compton and the wallet over on McDonald Road, which was miles away.
Teresa's red wallet had been found at the side of a back road as if it had been tossed from a moving vehicle, which was inconsistent and bizarre.
I don't think we ever really made sense of it. My parents seemed to think that something happened at the residence. Something must have happened. Of course, to a certain extent, you do put that on yourself. Because I was at that residence, okay? Everybody knew one another. We were all living somewhat together. How could I not know something?
Right around the 1-year anniversary of her disappearance, my father was at a crossroads. Were they going to take legal action against a police force or against the school? What was the next step? And I think he just made the decision, I need to live now with my 2 surviving children and my wife, because that's the priority. And leave matters inconclusive in regard to the death of Teresa. At various points, I think we all blamed ourselves for this because we were unable to do anything to stop it. But we all decided it was best to move on. By 2002, I'm no longer living in Canada. And I had a family of my own. I had a 5-year-old daughter, and I began to question the legacy of my elder sibling dying, and what was the message in that entire horrible event? What was I going to tell my children? I didn't have a good answer. So I realized that I needed to learn about everything to do with my sister's death. But I'm living in North Carolina, so I had to very quickly become a cyber detective to do the majority of my investigation online.
John was determined to investigate Teresa's case and get to the bottom of what exactly happened. I was probably a little more apprehensive about, jumping right into this.
The initial step was looking through libraries of newspaper digests and things like that. Then I phoned the Quebec police and I said, can I see my sister's case file? They said, yes, I can. So the next step was to fly to Quebec and visit the police headquarters where the case file was. And it all kind of just cascaded from there. An investigator brought a box, and I methodically went through papers and testimonies and translating. What does this mean? At the conclusion of that day, as I left, I asked, what about the physical evidence? What about the bra and underwear? And he said, it's been destroyed. It's been disposed of. And I said, it's been what? Well, when did that happen? He said, well, that happened about 5 years after she was found. And he said it in a manner that was like, well, we do this all the time. I was shocked. This was another aha moment. While in Quebec, it was very important for me to see physical places. I wanted to see where Teresa was found, where the wallet was found. I wanted to see where she was last seen. And I'm right at the site where her body was found, trying to reconcile these theories of she might have overdosed in the residence, or she might have been a runaway, with how she was found, how she was dressed, what was missing, what was found further away. I came to a conclusion that this was not a drug overdose. This was a murder. This is a panorama of the dump site. At a certain point, I wanted for the public, particularly the residents of Sherbrooke, Eastern Townships, Lennoxville, to know what I was learning. And so I had a friend, Patricia Pearson, who was a crime writer for Toronto newspapers. And in the summer of 2002, the two of us together wrote a series of 3 articles. And I started a website called Who Killed Teresa, which investigated the unsolved murder of my sister. The whole purpose of it was for people to come forward and contribute information. After the articles, a reporter contacted me for a follow-up interview, and then rather nonchalantly, he told me that he had a document that he had retrieved, and it was a second coroner's report, not the one that said violent death of undetermined means. This document was from the day of the discovery of the body, April 13th, 1979. The new document was faxed over to me, so I'm reading it along, and it says, strangulation marks around the neck. And I'm like, what? How does this piece of evidence reconcile with a drug overdose? To me, it points to homicide. But what you read on paper is only leading you to more questions, for which you want more information, which leads to more questions. So one of the things I wanted to do was to verify if there was drugs in her system when she died. And I was trying to find the toxicological report, and lo and behold, it was in my father's pile of documents, but it was kind of hidden, and it seems to me that he hadn't looked at it either. When I looked at the toxicological report, it stated undeniably that there were no evidence of drugs in her system. None, nothing.
This was a huge eye-opener. Here's something that was determined years ago, but was kept from the family.
You have another document that flies in the face of the police's theory. They say drugs, this document says no drugs. I began to realize that, wait a minute, the police are an inhibitor to the process. Why didn't they fully investigate my sister's case? The realization that my sister Teresa was murdered naturally led to, by who? So I began to look at the public record about what else was going on at that time in the area around the college campus, and came to find that not only was it a time of intensely clustered sexual assaults against women, but also there were an awful lot of murders happening that I felt were related or informative to Teresa's murder. The earliest case is 17 months before Teresa's incidents. A woman in her 20s named Louise Cameron is last seen at a corner store in downtown Sherbrooke. Her body is found in the woods just outside of Sherbrooke. She was raped, and there was a bootlace around her neck. In January 1978, 10-year-old Manon Dubé goes missing in downtown Sherbrooke. Her body is found in a creek not far from where Teresa's body was found. In June, 18-year-old Carol Facteau is found naked in a stream. Her wallet is found deposited by the side of the road. None of the cases, Dubé, Louise Cameron, Carol Facteau, were ever solved. One of the things that just seemed logical to me to do, why don't we document where they were found and see if there's some kind of association with the geographic plot points. The most striking thing about the map initially is somebody is committing a crime in the cluster around downtown Sherbrooke and then disposing of the evidence. What I suspected was that one offender was responsible for these murders.
John was developing more of a serial killer type of theory around what had happened to Teresa. This wasn't just an isolated case anymore. There were other women in the area that died in similar situations.
I needed the muscle of a professional, and that muscle was Kim Rosmo, who's a Canadian who was trained as a behavioral profilist by the FBI in Quantico. And we went to him and said, well, I have a map where I plotted all these points. He said, that's geographic profiling. Through the data points, what you want to arrive at is a probable location of where the offender lived or habituated, and ultimately who that offender was. I asked him, based on what we know, can you suggest an offender who would most likely be responsible for these murders? And he said, yes, I can, and his name is Luc Gregoire. Kim Rosmo told me Luc Gregoire had a rap sheet in the area for numerous sexual assaults and rapes, and in 1993, he committed the murder of a convenience store clerk, and for that, he was convicted and given a life sentence.
I thought that Luc Gregoire could have been the person who was responsible for Teresa's death and other women who died of a similar nature in the area.
So Kim Rosmo contacted the Sûreté de Quebec, saying that it's highly probable that these unsolved murders were committed by one person, and the cases need to be looked at together. So that was the lever that was pulled to say, okay, police, you have your professional verdict, investigate these crimes as the possible work of a serial sexual offender. The evidence was stacking up against Gregoire. It felt I was moving in the right direction. The pursuit of Luc Gregoire was done in conjunction with the Sûreté de Quebec. I have had helpful investigators and not so helpful investigators. And for a time, I had a very helpful investigator who planted a mole in Gregoire's cell to see if they could get Gregoire to admit something, and he never did. And then in 2015, he died in prison. There was no follow-up from the police. I wanted justice for my sister and my family, so I partnered again with Patricia Pearson to write a book. It was called Wish You Were Here, and it laid out the case against Luc Gregoire. One of the points of the book was for people to respond to it and say, you're right or you're wrong. The book comes out in the fall of 2020. You go fishing and you wait to see what you're going to catch. After the book was published, it took a while, but eventually people started to come forward with potential suspects. And in the fall of 2021, I received an email from a person living in the eastern townships in Sherbrooke, who I will call Alex, who wanted to report to me a deathbed confession by a relative named Gerald Lachance. And it was about an episode where he was involved in the abduction and murder of a young woman in the fall of 1978. So the story is this. Gerald Lachance was out joyriding with his older brother, Regis Lachance, and a third person who was described as younger in the driver's seat. And they picked up a young female hitchhiker in Lennoxville, Quebec, where my sister was last seen. They proceeded to drive somewhere along the way, they pulled over to the side of the road, and Regis got out of the passenger seat and dragged the young woman out of the car, down an embankment, and disappeared into the darkness in the night. After a period of time, Gerald gets out of the car to see what's happened. He walks down the embankment and discovers his older brother holding the hitchhiker underwater as if to drown or choke them. He says, "What's going on?" Regis bursts out and says, "Get back in the car." And they drive off in the night, leaving his young female victim dead or near death. The description of the event eerily matched what could have happened to my sister Teresa. Alex said also that the older brother, Regis, was already deceased by this point. And that not only was he responsible for other crimes in the area, he may have been responsible for other murders. Alex cited the 77 murder of Louise Camera. They cited the murder of Carol Facteau in 1978. They also mentioned that the police possibly knew of him and that he was a protected member of organized crime. Protected means he was a police informant, meaning the lead suspect in your sister's murder is protected by the police. It is, holy take your breath away, yeah. I want to introduce a piece of evidence here, the red wallet belonging to my sister, which she had in her possession the day she died. The moment that Regis Lachance was profiled as a suspect, there was this realization that the wallet may hold a DNA sample that would match Regis Lachance. And I took the wallet and the Lachance DNA swab to a local lab. They tested them, and what came back is frustratingly the worst possible result. It was inconclusive. The wallet contained male DNA. We didn't know who it belonged to. That was disappointing, very frustrating. Another dead end in so many dead ends, but you pick up and you try something else.
This wallet, is this a piece of your sister's life?
I don't go there. I can't go there. The idea of holding the wallet and it holding some powerful connection with Teresa, that all of that is true, but none of that is very useful to me as an investigator, because you're trying not to mourn the victim, you're trying to solve their murder. So now I want to go to Canada for the specific purpose of finding even more supporting evidence that is compelling to say that this is the right suspect, Regis Lachance. It's going to be hard to say what I want to say. It's really going to be hard. I don't know if I can do it. March 30th was a devastating day. My phone rang, and it was a state trooper. John has been involved in an accident. Okay, what kind of an accident has John been involved in? There's silence. Where is John? Is he in the hospital? No, he died in the accident. He was struck by a car on his bike.
I broke down and cried. I couldn't talk to him anymore. I had to hand the phone to my wife. We just couldn't believe it, that this had happened. Both John and Teresa died tragic deaths. It's really difficult to deal with. It's to get your head around. Why? What did we do wrong to deserve something like this? Where do you go from here? Where do you go from here? John has done so much on his own over the last 35 years with all of this investigative work. This case continues forward, even without John being here. And I think that's very important to continue to do.
There is a journalist, Nicolas Berube, who I'm going to meet with in Montreal and discuss the potential of publishing a new article.
When I learned that John was killed riding his bike, doing what he loved, it was such a shock. 2 days after his passing, he was supposed to fly to Montreal. We were supposed to meet and discuss the way the story could move forward. John learned that Gérard and Régis Lachance were two brothers who lived in the Sherbrooke area at that time. Teresa was found. They were very violent men. John believed that Régis Lachance was the best candidate for being his sister's killer. We got this information through a deathbed confession from his brother.
I think Teresa was hitchhiking from Lennoxville to Compton, and she thought that she was going to get a ride back to the Compton residence, and she got into the car with the wrong people. It's a hard thing to really process in your head, the way that she died. Probably because to a certain extent, I don't want to.
Prior to his death, John gave me the contact information of this person, a family member who got the deathbed confession. And I contacted this family member, interviewed them to write a story about the confession. But a few days before the article was to publish, this family member contacted me and basically they had cold feet. If this story comes out, it might upset some people who are still alive today, even if it's a story that happened many decades ago. They have people who could basically hurt you if you cross them. And so I decided with my editors to not publish the story because it would put this person in danger. And I know John was upset about that. He was not happy, but he understood. I feel that my duty now is to publish this best theory that we have, and to do it in a way that wouldn't jeopardize the safety of this person. And now I feel that it's upon me to do it.
Hello, Mr. Nicholas.
Hi, Stéphane. How are you?
Pretty good yourself.
I'm good, thank you. Stéphane Luce worked with John for many years. He's met with that person who's part of the Lachance family and got a deathbed confession.
What brought me and John together was the fact that I was seeking people that have lived the same thing that I lived. We both lost a loved one. He lost his sister and I lost my mother. She was murdered back in 1981. We became good friends. Once the first or second beer was taken, we would talk about cases and it would last for a few hours.
I'm writing this story, around the idea that John had contact with Régis Lachance's family member.
I heard lots of things, you know. The most interesting element was the Régis Lachance theory. There were 3 persons in the car.
I got the same story you had. Régis Lachance reportedly was in the back with Teresa, and there was Gérard Lachance, Régis' brother, and there was a third person who apparently was the driver.
That's what I wanted to talk about with John, you know. Who's that third person? Who's that driver? And I said it to the police first, and, you know, I don't think they took me seriously. Finding out who that person is, I think, would be the key to the answer of this investigation.
The point to all of this is there is still the potential that the young man who was driving the car that night is still alive and therefore is a potential witness to the murder of my sister.
The driver, that person might still be alive today. What sense do you have of who that person might be?
It must be somebody very, very close to the Lachance. Most probably a friend or maybe someone part of the family.
At one point I was corresponding with a defense attorney who had worked in that area, and he had told me about a case that he had worked on that had been really screwed up as consequence to the police's actions, and in particularly the testimony of a police informant. The police informant's name was Régis Lachance.
We were shocked because did that status protected him from scrutiny? Did the investigators have an incentive not to dig in too deep into who killed Teresa? Did they explore every avenue, or it was more convenient not to do that? Did they ask, and they didn't like the answer they were given? This article can keep the ball rolling.
True.
Maybe a person who was afraid to talk like 40 years ago or even 20 years ago, maybe now they have something they want to get off their chest.
Yeah, exactly. At least answers will be given to the family. You know, I mean, John's parents and John's brother, they still need answers.
If that person is still alive today, the hope was that they can come forward and they can be contacted by the police, or it was at least a possibility that they could help solve this.
Well, I hope that someone will come forward and say what happened that night. I count on that article to get more answers.
John's legacy is, of course, the investigation work that he's done around my sister's death. He worked so hard on Teresa's case. It's also more than that. John had many different facets of his life. He was a stage actor, a budget director for the town of Durham. He was a family man. He loved his 3 daughters. I'll definitely miss John.
Do you mind if we film your little mouse sock?
No.
My daughter is going to be so happy that you did. Whether it makes the final cut or not, she's just going to be happy. I wish Teresa could have known my kids. I see so much of her in them, in all of them. That's really the problem when somebody dies. It's less about the tragedy that they didn't fulfill their life, although that is sorrowful. It's more about how they left you to fulfill your life without them. On a very real level, I never feel that I don't have my sister. Spiritually, or whatever you believe, their wisdom carries on and informs you, or it becomes your wisdom or your sixth sense. I'm not alone. on this quest. I'm not alone. I've never felt that way. All we do on this earth, ultimately, is we move through space. And it's just not the kick that it was moving through space without her.
Talk about the happiness of two of us. I give you a kiss of love, the motions on the water, imprinting the image of the two of us. All spaces harmonious, the night scene is like 1,000 colorful flowers, floating like a seagull's wings. Wrap your arms around each other on the passionately in love. Two big hearts together, listening to the rhythm of music and poetic lyrics. Words of love, remember to look forward to. I secretly hope I'll never be far away. Even though time changes color, you and I will always play together.
Living in the eastern townships in Sherbrooke, who I will call Alex, who wanted to report to me a deathbed confession by a relative named Gerald Lachance. And it was about an episode where he was involved in the abduction and murder of a young woman in the fall of 1978. So the story is this. Gerald Lachance was out joyriding with his older brother, Regis Lachance, and a third person who was described as younger in the driver's seat. And they picked up a young female hitchhiker in Lennoxville, Quebec, where my sister was last seen. They proceeded to drive. Somewhere along the way, they pulled over to the side of the road, and Regis got out of the passenger seat and dragged the young woman out of the car, down an embankment, and disappeared into the darkness in the night. After a period of time, Gerald gets out of the car to see what's happened. He walks down the embankment and discovers his older brother holding the hitchhiker underwater as if to drown or choke them. He says, "What's going on?" Regis bursts out and says, "Get back in the car." And they drive off in the night, leaving his young female victim dead or near death. The description of the event eerily matched what could have happened to my sister Teresa. Alex said also that the older brother, Regis, was already deceased by this point. And that not only was he responsible for other crimes in the area, he may have been responsible for other murders. Alex cited the 1977 murder of Louise Camera. They cited the murder of Carol Facteau in 1978. They also mentioned that the police possibly knew of him and that he was a protected member of organized crime. Protected means he was a police informant, meaning the lead suspect in your sister's murder is protected by the police. It is, holy take your breath away, yeah. I want to introduce a piece of evidence here, the red wallet belonging to my sister, which she had in her possession the day she died. The moment that Regis Lachance was profiled as a suspect, there was this realization that the wallet may hold a DNA sample that would match Regis Lachance. And I took the wallet and the Lachance DNA swab to a local lab. They tested them, and what came back is frustratingly the worst possible result. It was inconclusive. The wallet contained male DNA. We didn't know who it belonged to. That was disappointing, very frustrating. Another dead end in so many dead ends, but you pick up and you try something else.
This wallet, is this a piece of your sister's life?
I don't go there. I can't go there. The idea of holding the wallet and it holding some powerful connection with Teresa, that all of that is true, but none of that is very useful to me as an investigator, because you're trying not to mourn the victim, you're trying to solve their murder. So now I want to go to Canada for the specific purpose of finding even more supporting evidence that is compelling to say that this is the right suspect, Regis Lachance.